What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use the code BBDNVR, for 15% off of your first order. BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Hope everybody had a good weekend. As a Broncos fan, admittedly, not the best football Sunday I've ever had. I was kind of thinking about it. It's funny the similarities that there have been between CSU and Broncos over the last 10 years. I don't think this is the first time I've mentioned it, but this is purely just from a vibe standpoint. It's felt like they've been very similar. Quarterback struggles, ugly ways to lose, all of the above. It was, I don't know, a very fitting, very CSU finish to the end of the Broncos-Colts game with the penalty and then just finding a way to blow a game that you seemingly had in the bag. But it's a new week. We've got new storylines to talk about. We have a quarterback competition that has seemingly been resolved. I don't know if Braden ever really was in true threat of losing his gig, although it really did seem like they were giving Jackson Brousseau more of a look last week than at any point we had ever seen in the past. I had said all along that my gut was that they would keep Braden under center. That's the plan for UTSA. We'll talk about that later on in the show. We're going to be joined by my good friend Tyler King of the Denver Gazette. I'm going to pick his brain on CSU to this point, get his thoughts on Braden keeping the job, all of that. Before we get into all of that and play some clips of Jay Norvell from today's press conference, I did kind of just want to set the scene for this week. I would say really since the schedule was released back last spring, we've kind of pinpointed this matchup with UTSA as a pivotal moment, a moment that could have significant implications on the rest of the season and really CSU football moving forward in the big picture as well. You kind of assumed you'd be 1-1 at this point. Obviously, we all thought that the Rams would play better against Northern Colorado than they did. We've beaten that one like a dead horse. We've talked about everything that you could talk about from the UNC game 100 times. Optically, it was not a good look, and it put more pressure on CSU than there already was going into this one. And again, as we've said, there was always going to be quite a bit of pressure on this matchup in Washington State. I would say to this point, this matchup against UTSA looks a little bit more challenging than Washington State. Washington State and Oregon State have both struggled significantly out of the gate, not doing great to help the optics of the future Pac-12 being considered a power conference and all that, but that's a tangent for a different day. I think at this point, we all know what the UNC game was. It was a letdown. It was a disappointment, but at the end of the day, you found a way to get a win. Obviously didn't really feel like one, but it is what it is. Let's move on. Let's kind of start to focus on what's at hand, and what's at hand is a major opportunity for CSU. I mean, you win these next two, you're halfway to bowl eligibility. If you were 3-1, I think a lot would be forgiven, despite some of the frustration, despite some of the skepticism from a large portion of the fan base. And, especially after games like what we saw, against UNC, I can't really say that there's that the folks that are, still in that corner are wrong. It's obviously not been super validating from an eye test standpoint. They've just left a lot to be desired to this point, especially on the offensive side. Defensively, I have some complaints about what happened on that final drive, but they did get a lot of stops despite the fact that they were put in a pretty bad position repeatedly, and really even against Washington, when you factor in field position, it has not done the defense a whole lot of favors. This matchup against UTSA, it's going to be tough. You know, Jay Norvell, he referred to UTSA as one of the premier group of 5 programs in the country, along with schools like Liberty and Boise State, Tulane, and Memphis. When you look at the success they've had over the last 5 years, 5 straight winning seasons, I think he's spot on. I mean, this is a tough test. I would say that winning this game would be a top 5 win in terms of quality of the Norvell era. It would be up there, you know, with Boise State. I mean, I think you have to put, even if they weren't great last year, Wyoming and Air Force and those types of wins in there. It'd be up there with those types of wins, just in terms of quality. There haven't been many wins of this status, I would say, not even just under Norvell, but even going back to, you'd have to go back to like 2015, 2016, 2017, you know, Oregon State in 2017, actually UTSA in 2016 is a decent example. They have not played UTSA since they played them back-to-back years in 2015 and 2016. Both were CSU wins. Both were pretty good games. This is a prove-it week for CSU. It's a prove-it week for Jay Norvell. As Paul says in the Toyota chat, it's, you know, kind of a make-or-break moment for Jay, for BFN, with Jay deciding to keep Braden as the starter. I get it. You know, you have a lot invested in him to this point. I've said quite a few times that I feel like he is the most physically gifted quarterback on the roster, and I just don't think it would have been an easy decision to go away from him after having invested the last couple of years in him, and just, again, knowing that I think from a physical talent standpoint, Braden is definitely the best option that they have, but they've got to put it together here. They've got to find some consistency. We're going to play some clips of Jay Norvell talking about this. I asked him, you know, how Braden has responded through all of this. It's kind of an emotional moment, you know, when you are QB1. Now all of a sudden you're in a quarterback competition. I was curious as to how he's handled that. Here is Jay referring to that. It can be emotional, obviously, if you're in Braden's position. Just how have you seen him handle this? You know,
I think Braden understands his role on this team. You know, and I think his role is intensified, obviously, because he's the quarterback. But I think all of our players got to understand how their execution and understanding of situational football affects the whole team. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time with Braden over this past week, watching ball, talking about situations, and how he can kind of change his thought process and how to help the football team. And at the end of the day, that's his job. His job is to complete passes, to get his teammates involved and put us in position to win. And I think he sees that a little bit better than he has. And Braden's a good football player. He's won a bunch of games for us. He's got a lot of experience. And now, you know, we need to lean on that experience as we move forward.
So that was the first moment today where Jay kind of alluded to the fact that it would be Braden, that they would continue to stick with him. Again, we've heard so much about his experience and kind of suffering through, you know, the struggles the last couple of years, going through some lumps of playing an inexperienced quarterback, all to get to this point. That's why it just would have been really surprising to pull the plug on Braden at this stage of the season. I just think you have too much invested in him, and for better or for worse, he is Jay's guy. Now, I do think that Jay has been openly critical of Braden in a way that we haven't seen in the past. I do think the leash is probably significantly shorter than it's ever been at any point, but especially at this stage of the season with all of your goals still on the table, it would have been surprising to me to pull the plug at this point. Here is Jay kind of talking first about Owen McCown and the importance of keeping him in the pocket. He's got a really quick release, but he's also somebody that can hurt you with his legs if given the opportunity. But then Jay kind of talks about, you know, some stuff that we could see with the offense, potentially a little bit more tempo, potentially getting Braden out of the pocket a little bit more as well. We've talked about that a lot in the past. Some of those 2-minute drill scenarios, some of those quick tempo situations, that's honestly when Braden has been able to get in a rhythm the most consistently over the course of his career. It's when he's looked the most impressive. So here's some more clips of Jay kind of talking about all of that today, and then we will keep all of this rolling.
You mentioned McCown's ability to quick release. How do you disrupt the passing game when maybe without counting on sacks?
Well, I think it's important. You know, I watched games all last weekend, and it's so important to keep guys in the pocket. You know, I would almost rather keep a guy in a pocket than get a sack, and then or try to get sacks and let guys slip out and lose contain. If you look at most games when the game's in the balance and people are playing each other pretty evenly, a quarterback can make the difference by just sprinting out and running on third down. You know, Braden did it our last game for the winning touchdown. And so, you know, he's a guy, I think it's more important that we keep him in the pocket and make him read it and throw it than to try to find all kind of creative ways to sack him and let him out of the pocket at times. So we'll try to do a good job at disciplining that. And I like to do that the whole rest of the year, to be honest with you. I think that's the most important thing, is not letting these guys get loose and run for extra yards.
Kind of off of that, would you possibly like to get Braden out of the pocket more? It seems like he throws the ball.
Yeah, Braden has shown that he likes that's a strength of his. Being able to throw on the perimeter and throw on the move has been a strength. We did quite a bit of it last year, and we'll probably do more of it as we move forward. But also, we've been trying to get Braden on the edge and use his legs a little bit more. And you know, we're using Taj in that capacity a little bit, but I think we'll see more of that as we move forward.
So it sounds like certainly planning to start Braden again.
Yeah.
See if you can get him going. Seems like at times he in tempo seems to really relish that.
Yeah.
Is there some of that where, you know, it can be a way to kind of kickstart an offense?
No doubt. Braden likes to play fast. He always has. You know, and he's really comfortable in the 2-minute drill. That's probably his most comfortable drill. And so we'll try to utilize that. You know, we had a chance to go back and really look at things that he likes, that, you know, that we can hang our hat on. You know, he's been our quarterback and he is our quarterback. And, you know, Jackson Brousseau is ready. We practiced Jackson with the one some last week. Our guys are comfortable with Jackson being in that one huddle. But Braden's our guy. We got to get him playing good and feeling confident. And this is an important week for us to do that.
Putting a bow kind of on the Braden stuff before we get into a couple more things that we learned from Jay's press conference today. It does sound like the intent is to maybe simplify some things offensively. We didn't really hear him talk about it in that clip, but if you go watch the entire presser, and you can on the DMVR Rams Twitter, that is one of the things he mentioned, as well as, you know, maybe getting Braden out on the perimeter a little bit more, getting him out of the pocket, allowing him to use his athleticism. I've talked about how he throws well on the move a bunch of times over these last couple of years. The Rams are looking for consistency with the offense as a whole, and that's first and foremost, you know, comes down to the quarterback. And I do think at this point, like, you're kind of married together. It's on Braden to live up to the standard, but it's also on Jay to put him in a position to succeed. And I think they have had a chance here with the bye to reevaluate some things. And now obviously the hope is that we'll see some different results. I mean, it hasn't been all bad. The problem, the struggle, whatever you want to call it, as it has been pretty frequently the last couple of years, has just come down to a lack of consistency. I mean, you see them put 2-3 nice solid drives together. You get, you know, the tight ends involved, you get the receivers involved, you get that run game going, and then they just have these long lulls, you know, quarter, 2 quarters at a time, where they're just so stagnant offensively, and that cannot continue to be the case. I mean, especially with the fact that you do have a veteran under center in his 3rd year starting, and even if this receiving core doesn't have Tory Horton out there, I do think they have too much talent and too much athleticism to continue to have the struggles that they've had offensively this year. So I'm really interested to see kind of what that looks like on Saturday. If they do go back to more of a pro style scheme, lean on that ground game a little bit more. We've heard so much about the running backs, and obviously they've clearly been the biggest strength of the offense to this point. But I don't think it's surprising that Jay is sticking with Braden after everything that he's invested in him to this point. It works both ways too. I mean, Braden has had opportunities to transfer. I know people love to mock him online for that and the $600,000 and the memes. He had legit offers each of the last 2 off seasons, and then he chose to stick around at CSU. That does count for something, and I think that Braden, to this point, has earned one more opportunity here to kind of prove himself. Now, again, if it looks like what it did against UNC, then I do think the leash is shorter, and we could see Brousseau. They've repped him with the ones in a way that they really have not previously. But I think if CSU is going to achieve its goals this year, if the Rams are going to be the type of offense that they have the potential to be, I personally believe that they're most likely to accomplish that with Braden, just because of some of the things that he can do physically. And I do think you can use his legs a little bit more. And if you're running the ball effectively, I think you can create some opportunities and play action. I think he throws a nice deep ball. The thing I'd like to see from him this week is, can you get in a rhythm and can you hit the easy ones? You know, he's done the extraordinary at times throughout his career, but can you just do the simple stuff consistently? You know, can you hit those crossers underneath? Can you make those intermediate throws across the middle? If you can do that, you know, I have faith that he can do some of the crazy stuff, you know, throwing along the sidelines and the deep ball and some of that type of stuff. But he's got to settle in. You know, he's got to find a groove. The footwork's got to be there, all of that. But we'll see. It's definitely a big opportunity for him this weekend. I'm going to get into some more stuff that we have learned about UTSA, some stuff that Jay said at the press conference today. 2:30, we're going to be joined by my good friend Tyler King of the Denver Gazette. Let's take a quick break, shout out our partners, then we'll keep that going. All right, I know at times you can question if you are excited for college football season to be back, like against UNC a couple of weekends ago. But the minute that you're back out there, you know, smelling the smells of the tailgate, the dogs on the grill, you know, cracking open an ice cold beer, there's just nothing better than being on campus, especially this time of year. It's not cold yet. The sun is shining. Kickoff is going to be perfect this weekend. And if you're looking for great deals on tickets, our friends at Game Time have you covered. Checked a couple of times the last couple of days, and they have tickets for as low as like $35. You can get really good deals on tickets in the 100s. There's nothing better than hitting up a college football game, being back on campus, seeing the alma mater, taking the family. And with the Game Time app, it's just the best way to get tickets. It's the easiest, most convenient. You know you're going to get 100% authentic tickets on time and at the best price. Plus, the fees are always included. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Tap Ticket Go. Download the Game Time app today. I also want to shout out our friends at Coors Light, who encourage you to never lose your chill. You guys know the drill. Life is going to test you. It's going to throw little things at you. Getting worked up, it rarely happens. Do the things that put you in a chill state of mind. I'm not even talking about the times, you know, you're trying to avoid getting pissed off and causing a scene or something like that. I'm just mean like the little inconveniences in life. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. You know, somebody bumps into you in the parking lot or something like that. It's just the little things. They add up. They can get under the skin. They can make you a bad vibe. You don't want that. Put yourself in a chill state of mind. And then when you're kicked back, when you're smiling, when everything's all roses, crack open a nice cold Coors Light. When the mountains turn blue, it's as cold as the Rockies. Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smoother finish. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill by choosing Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door. Visit CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. All right. If keep the questions, comments, etc. rolling in the Toyota chat. It's great to see everybody. If I don't get to them right away, we can always star it and come back at the end of the show. I appreciate everybody rocking live with us on YouTube. If you wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up, I certainly would appreciate that as well. Just a couple of other key things I felt like that stood out from Jay's 20 minutes with us today. He mentioned that he knows Jeff Traylor really well. The two of them have a relationship that goes back to Traylor being a head coach in East Texas high school football. And, you know, Jay obviously working in the Big 12 all those years, kind of established a relationship with him back then. Then they coached together at Texas. Jay actually said that they roomed together for multiple years. I assume he meant on the road, but I guess it's possibly meant, you know, just in town as well. Sometimes, you know, coaches don't move their full families to a new gig. They want to see if it's going to work out and all that. I certainly get it. It's a tough way to make a living. But I thought that was interesting. The fact that they do go back. These coaches obviously know each other pretty well. That could be an interesting wrinkle in this. And it sounds like Kojo Antwi, the plan for him will probably be to get him on the field come conference play. He's been an active participant throughout fall camp. He hasn't missed a practice yet. He is way ahead of schedule. I mean, he only tore his Achilles like 6-7 months ago. So the fact that it's even a possibility for him to be playing this fall is pretty significant. I think last winter you would have said best case, maybe you're able to get him on the field like late November or something like that. If they can have him for the 8 games in conference play, if he's able to move and take advantage of his speed, which is his greatest strength as a playmaker, I think he could be a big boost to this passing offense. So that's encouraging. They certainly could use him. They need these receivers to step up. I think part of it has been on Braden. I think part of it has been on the offense maybe getting a little bit too cute, but also, like at some point you've just got to step up and you've got to find a way to get open when you have an opportunity to make a play. You've got to do it. You got to seize the moment. Carpe diem, if you will. All right, let's kind of talk about UTSA as a whole. Obviously, we'll still have the preview episode on Friday, but this is a really tough test for CSU. I mean, whether you consider them a premier group of 5 program like Jay does or not, this is a really well-coached program. They've had 5 straight winning seasons. They're fundamentally sound. They're one of 9 teams in the country that has yet to commit a turnover this season. They're one of those teams that you have got to beat because they're very likely not going to beat themselves. Have had some penalties rack up the last couple weeks. That is maybe one factor to keep an eye on. But other than that, I mean, they go out and do their thing, especially on the offensive side. They're still kind of trying to figure some things out defensively. Norvell talked about today how a lot like CSU had significant turnover on that side of the football. But he feels like the pieces that they have in place are good fits. They've got a lot of size in their traditional 3-4 look. They've got big, strong, athletic defensive ends. They've got size in the secondary. Secondary's had some struggles. When you watch them, they have gotten torched through the air a little bit. But it is a team that if you overlook, they are certainly good enough to come in and kick your ass. I mean, they aren't the Longhorns, they aren't even Texas Tech, but this is a program that has a firm identity, and they do what they do well, which is run the football. And then as soon as the defense gets lulled in, as soon as you start stacking the box, what do? They take shots over the top. McCown's a great thrower of the football, highly accurate. He's making good decisions, no interceptions this year. A lot of his passing production did come in this last matchup against Incarnate Word. Nice win for UTSA after starting the season 0-2. Played a competitive game, though, against Texas A&M, and then they lost a shootout to a really good Texas State team. So, I mean, I don't think they had anything to hang their heads about or anything like that. But this is a team that's going to test your discipline on both sides of the football. Nick wants to know, AJ Nolan didn't play last game. Do you know what his status is? We'll have to see if he's practicing tomorrow and Wednesday. Definitely hoping to have him back. He was questionable for last week, so my guess is they'll have him back. But if he is not in practice, there's actually a couple of guys whose status I need to check on with Jay on Wednesday. So we shall see. Usually I try and see if they're practicing before we ask that type of stuff, but a good question. They certainly could use him in the secondary. He is a guy who's really rangy, and I think he could be very beneficial in terms of, defense against some of these vertical shots that UTSA loves to throw in the mix. But again, it really comes down to your discipline. They've got a really talented running back in Robert Henry Jr. Norvell mentioned today that they've had a ton of explosive runs. I think they've had a 75-yard run in every single game this season, which is kind of crazy. I mean, you do it 2 weeks in a row, that's one thing, but to do it 3, that's downright wild. He has 480 yards on 47 carries, 10.2 yards per carry. But even if you take away those big explosive runs, I still think he's north of 6 yards a pop. So he's just been a workhorse for them. 6 rushing touchdowns. UTSA has had 2 or more rushing touchdowns in every single game this season. They average 34 attempts on the ground. That is their bread and butter. That is what they want to do. If they're able to move the sticks consistently, it puts you in a really vulnerable position because you don't really have any choice but to load up against that talented rushing attack. And then as soon as you do, they're going play action, they're going vertical over the top. And if you're out of position, I mean, McCown will burn you. He gets rid of the football really quickly. I mean, they're just really methodical, and they execute really well. As out of sync as CSU has looked these last couple of weeks, as out of sorts at least as they were against UNC, UTSA offensively has been the complete opposite. Now defensively they've had some struggles, like McCown and Henry. They're making up for a lot because UTSA, they score about 35 points a game, but they allow about 34. They're averaging like 410 yards of offense and giving up 400. So I mean, it's been shootouts for sure. But they've got a lot of talent on that offensive side of the football. You got to look out for Devin McEwen, I think. McEwen. 18 catches for 167 yards, 2 touchdowns, averages about 6 yards, or 6 receptions, I should say, per game. Defensively, Banks at linebacker is a name you should know. 20 tackles. He also has a couple of interceptions, so you got to look out for him in the middle of the field. They've got a defensive lineman, I'm going to butcher his name, Ozuwalu, who has 4 tackles for loss and a couple of sacks as well. So those are kind of some of the guys that you should know as far as UTSA goes, but really McCown, and then more specifically Henry in the backfield, is kind of the stick that stirs the drink, if you will. Coming off of a 48-20 win over Incarnate Word, they're going to be a big test for this CSU defense. And really offensively, it kind of feels like on both sides of the ball, this is a nice opportunity to gauge yourself against, at least on paper, what should be level competition. Obviously, CSU played down to UNC in that last matchup, so you're hoping that this time they play up to their competition, if they will, closer to what we saw against Washington in week 1, but for 4 quarters instead of just 2. But it feels like, defensively, if you could create some turnovers against an offense who's done a really great job protecting the football and has really, put a lot of points on the board, has created explosives, if you could limit the damage that way, make them drive the length of the field over and over again, maybe get them to settle for 3 a couple of times. I mean, it's kind of a bend, don't break week, if we're being honest. But if they could do that against a quality UTSA team, I think that would make you feel pretty good. And it would kind of be validating of some of the more optimistic angles that you could have maybe found on the defensive side against UNC. Did give up a couple of touchdowns. Both of them were the product of bad turnovers. I mean, the field position game has not been in their favor. I think, this is a nice opportunity to see kind of what this group is potentially made of. And then offensively, this is not a defense that has been, the 85 Bears. They're not the 2015 Broncos. They've really given up a ton of yardage. You've had some struggles throwing the football. Well, they've had some struggles stopping teams from throwing the football. This is a week where, knock on wood, do whatever superstitious activity you need to do. You would like to see the offense really find a rhythm. And then defensively, I think you'd like to see them step up and made some big plays that potentially, swing the game in your favor, which they really have not been able to do a ton of at this point of the year, like the fumble recovery, I guess, against Washington. But I mean, that was a bum snap. Like, it wasn't you going out and making a play. I would like to see a little bit of that this weekend. We'll obviously be talking a ton about this matchup over the course of the week. I do want to get to my friend Tyler King, who should be on the show here in just a couple of minutes. Again, keep the questions, comments, all of that rolling. Let's take a quick break real quick. Let's shout out a couple of our partners. I'll get to a couple questions, comments, then we'll get Tyler on the show and get his thoughts on CSU to this point of the season. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota's built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you, like the all-new Tacoma. Check out the Land Cruiser as well. Toyota offers 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Not to be outdone, though, Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail. They're perfect for Colorado living. If you want to drive them around Cap Hill, perfect, nice and smooth, get good gas mileage. If you want to take them off-roading, they have that capability as well, going up to the mountains, hitting the slopes, hitting the western slope, all that stuff. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics, plus the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. Whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style. If you're looking for gear to make your brand stand apart from the crowd, Branded Bills has you covered with the best custom headwear. We've got some sweet ALLCITY merch coming. I'm hoping to get a little bit of that. Start your order, and their dedicated team will help you create the exact custom apparel that you need. They've got a partnership with CSU as part of their on-campus collection. Got a couple of sweet options in the background here. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Shout out to Branded Bills. All right. Henry says, it's frustrating to watch CSU be competitive in other sports. Volleyball, constantly playing P4 basketball, invite to the Maui Invitationals with big schools and expecting to be competitive in these games. Football, we're hoping our offense is consistent in the fourth year against UTSA. Yeah, man. I mean, that's not wrong. I mean, I think for 20 years, a lot of us have been hoping for more, and outside of, small flashes in the pan here or there, it just has not been the case. I mean, if you really want to go cynical, the cold hard truth is outside of a 10-year stretch under Sonny Lubick and a, small stretch, like in the early 1900s and then a little bit in the 50s again, like CSU historically has just not been a powerhouse in football. Now, that's not to say that they can't be. I think they're doing all the right things institutionally, from investing in resources and facilities and all that, and they've certainly taken some swings at guys, but the lack of consistency has been really frustrating. That said, I could totally see this happening, like beating a really quality UTSA team and the more cynical crowd still basically poo-pooing it, like, oh, that's not enough. And no, like at some point you do want to see CSU break through to that next level and accomplish more. This is a really good UTSA team. I know they don't have the brand power, the name recognition. They aren't as sexy as Washington State may be on a national level, but this is a significantly better team than Washington State, and I think they're going to be a lot harder matchup. So just keep that in mind this weekend. This is a tough matchup. I know we do want to see CSU accomplish a heck of a lot more. But I mean, they've got a great quarterback. They've got a really solid running game. Henry is their biggest stud in the backfield. Before I bring Tyler on, I do want to address this because I've had a couple of people tweet this at me, and now I've got somebody asking in the Toyota chat. Jacob wants to know, Justin, I keep seeing BFN at the bar. Are we cooked? I had multiple people tweet that they saw Braden at the bar over the weekend. You mean like every other 21-year-old on a college Saturday night, guys? That feels like we're grasping for straws here. If he was out, late night, it's 2 a.m. and they've got a game the next day, that's kind of a different conversation. But I don't know. It feels like people are kind of looking for things to sling his way, if I'm being completely transparent. Like, of all the things to complain about, you can lack about the offense or any of that, but I mean, a college kid, a 21-year-old or 22, however old he is, going to the bar on a weekend when they have a bye, that's pretty normal. You should hear the stories about BVP and them basically having to carry him out of the bar back in the day. But we've got our good friend Tyler King of the Gazette here. Let's bring him on the show. I don't want to make him wait behind the scenes too long. How's it going, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I've been doing good. It's been an interesting day. Obviously, Jay Norvell at the press conference today affirmed that it will, in fact, be Braden. That was kind of always my gut feeling all along, even if they did give Jackson an extended look this past week in a way that we hadn't really seen in the past. I guess just first things first, that's probably the biggest storyline of the season to this point. What are your thoughts on, the fact that they had to open up this quarterback competition, and what are your thoughts on Braden kind of being the guy moving forward?
Yeah, I'm not really surprised that it is Braden, the guy going forward. I mean, as you and Kevin talked about last week on the show, like, that was the most publicly critical Jay had been of Braden after the UNC game. Just kind of listening, even though I wasn't at the game, obviously listening back to his comments, it was pretty pointed about just, him missing some basic reads and stuff. And obviously you look at the stats and you go back and watch the game like I did. And it did not look good. Like Braden just didn't look like the player you would expect to see from a third-year starter. And this is something I know you mentioned last week too, Justin, but like the fact that they were talking all, off season, in the lead up to the season here about the payoff for Braden now in year 3, it just hasn't shown up. And I think that's, the most concerning part. Aside from like the numbers, this is something I wrote about, last week in writing about them needing to take advantage of this bye week, because that was a real wake-up call against UNC. I felt like you look at that Utah Tech game a couple years ago, like a similarly not great FCS team. Braden had like over 400 passing yards in that game and 4 touchdowns. And then against UNC, like he can barely cross 150. Like it's just not the recipe for success that you want to see for CSU. And you would expect Braden to be at the forefront of this offensive success this year with all the turnover they had. Up front on the offensive line, a lot of new playmakers on the outside. You thought Braden could be the guy to carry this unit. And it just, I was impressed by what he did in week 1 against Washington. So maybe that's just kind of recency bias with the UNC game. But it'll be interesting to see how he plays this week. I wasn't really expecting it to be Jackson Brousseau. Like I've seen a bunch of him. It seems like every time I come up during the preseason, it's for a scrimmage, and we see a lot of Jackson Brousseau in those settings. And nothing ever jumped out to me in terms of like he could really challenge Braden for the job. Like I think he's got a good physical skill set, but just in terms of controlling the game and some of those scrimmage settings, it just nothing really ever jumped out to me that he was a guy that was pushing to be the starter. But I guess with how Braden played against UNC, it was kind of that had to be at least discussed among the staff. But like you said, I'm not surprised that Braden's going to be this guy this week. And this will be an interesting, I know Jay used this term today, but measuring stick, not just for the whole team, but for Braden, particularly because this is a program that you compare yourself to probably or want to be maybe in terms of one of the top group of 5 teams after playing a good Big Ten team and then playing a bad FCS team. Like this is somewhere in the middle of where you expect of the opponent, of what you expect CSU to be. So this will be an interesting matchup for CSU on both sides of the ball, but I agree with particularly Braden in the offense.
Let me ask you this, because I asked Kevin the same thing late last week after at that point it was still an open competition, but we, assumed that it would still be Braden's gig, maybe with the shorter leash at this point, the fact that you've actually given Jackson a look and the inconsistencies you're having against the UNC team that I don't think was expected to light the world on fire or anything like that. But clearly Braden needs to play better. I think he would tell you that himself. And he took ownership of it. Saturday, it was like, wasn't my night. I asked him about, there being kind of a disconnect with the receivers, and he refused to put any of it on them. He's like, it's just on me. I've got to get them the ball. I liked all that, but do you feel like the struggles within the offense are as simple as, well, Braden, if you clean up the footwork and do a couple of things, hit on a couple more throws, that's all that needs to happen, or, could have gone the other way and gone a shakeup? Or is it like, what do you think about the scheme to this point? Like they're running a lot of different stuff. They're taking Braden on and off the field with the Taj Bullock stuff. And I think it's a fun wrinkle, and I think it's adds versatility. But I do think there's something to be said about it could be detrimental when it comes to getting your quarterback in a rhythm. I know that was super long-winded, but where are you at kind of with all of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like obviously the play calling stuff has been a thing the last couple of years with Jay. He's never really going to give that up. Like that's his thing. Like the thing he gave up this summer, this offseason, was the NIL stuff and the transfer portal stuff, kind of letting Alex Collins handle that as the GM. Then he can kind of get back to the football stuff, which I know he really is what he is his bread and butter. At least he feels like. It's been interesting these last couple of years because I thought what they were doing in 2023 really suited Braden a lot, and they wanted to get back to that this year after, I think last year's just kind of an outlier with the Tory injury and really leaning into a veteran offensive line and a guy like Avery Morrow at running back who is just really solid at picking up yards. I get all doing that all last year, but this year, I don't know. I felt better about them getting back to the more air raid concepts this season with some of the guys they have on the perimeter. I don't know what the disconnect is. Like, obviously I watched the first 2 games, and Jackson Warren was a guy that was really heavily involved in week 1 because, Jay talked about this too after that UW game. Like, Washington had some NFL caliber corners that are just better players than who CSU has at wide receiver. It's no diss on the CSU guys. It's just a different caliber of athlete. But I really thought like Jordan Ross could have a big game against UNC, and some of these other guys like Tommy Maher, who obviously had his struggles, mostly on special teams. But like, I thought these guys could really have a breakout game passing the ball, and you just didn't see that. And maybe we'll see that this week, because UTSA, I agree, is a really good group of 5 team, but they're also a team that gave up 43 points to Texas State 2 weeks ago. Another similarly program that aspires to be at the top of this group of 5 level, and a team that CSU is going to see a lot of over the next couple of years in the new look Pac-12. So it'll be interesting to see if CSU can really do some damage through the air. And I think it's got to be a blend of both the guys on the outside, like Jordan Ross, who I'm super high on, like Taylor Neer, I think could be a solid player. Tommy Maher as well. Jackson Warren kind of in the middle of the field. You got to take advantage of all of the guys you have out there, while obviously using the run game, because I'm super high on Jalen Dupree, but I don't think it should be all air raid. Like, I think it should be a balanced effort, but we haven't really seen that balance come to fruition yet in really at any point during Jay's tenure. Like, it's either been all passing game with very mixed results, or a run game last year that was very successful. And this year, they haven't really established any sort of identity yet. And like I said at the beginning, like, maybe that's because they played 2 very different caliber of opponents. And this week they can maybe settle into who they want to be. But I'm a little bit skeptical right now of what they're going to be offensively going forward.
What's your gut say, I guess, kind of going into this week? I mean, Jay mentioned that they might implement some things that they did well last year, in terms of trying to get Braden out of the pocket. And I think that makes sense. He's a guy who throws the ball well on the move. I don't know. Do you keep trying to go more into this air raid? If you were going to do that, maybe you try and mix in more tempo, which is something that Braden has done well. Also, you claim, you trust your defense this year in a way that you supposedly didn't this past season, which was another factor in some of the stuff they did offensively. What do you expect to see? Do you expect to see a drastically different offensive approach than what we saw against UNC? Or is it more of the same and just trying to like work it out more or less?
I think it's going to be mostly more of the same. I do like the tempo idea. Like, I think, I forget who asked about that earlier today. It might've been Kevin at Jay's press conference, but I think, like, Jay mentioned this too, like, Braden has been really, really good in that 2-minute drill situation throughout his career. And I don't know if there's just something about the tempo that works well with his play style, but you see him, I like when he's playing aggressive. I like when he's trying to push the ball down the field. Now, he can't be that 2023 version of himself that's turning the ball over too much, but I don't think a super conservative version of BFN is the best thing for this offense either. So maybe sticking with some of the air raid concepts, but playing with tempo, running the ball consistently as well. I think you can still do that while being a tempo team, and while having some of those air raid passing concepts. You can mix in a quality run game with that. And I think Jay did that well during his time at Nevada. Like, they weren't an all out passing team, even though they had Carson Strong, who put up really good numbers with good receivers. They still had a pretty balanced rushing attack that kept teams honest. So I like I said, I do think the tempo thing is something that they could really lean into, and that's something that might suit Braden's skill set more than trying to slow the game down like they did last year and like they have at times to start this year.
You and I were fairly optimistic about this team's potential this year. Realistically, 1-1 was always the most likely outcome, outside of pulling a 3-score upset on the road against a Washington team that's won 21 straight at home or whatever it is now. How much stock do you put into how they looked versus UNC versus how they looked against Washington? I mean, they were so bad against UNC. I'm almost inclined to put it more on the fluky side of things. How often are you going to fumble the football 4 times? But I don't think you can say it was nothing. Like, you have to put stock into it. But I guess just like, how much did it change, if any, your expectations for CSU this year?
I don't think it changed my expectations at all because I always had them, like you said, at 1-1. I had them at 2-2 as well, but I still had them at 8-4. After Mountain West play, like as at the end of the regular season, and I still think they can easily do that. Like they obviously built up a lot of goodwill. This is something I talked about, on my YouTube feed last week, or after the UNC game. Like they built up all this goodwill. Against Washington, and having that game be tied after 3 quarters, and it kind of looking impressively, mostly on the offensive side. Like they got pushed around near the end of that game defensively, but I always thought this team was going to be an offensive-led team if it was going to be successful this season. Now I just think you're back to square one. Like all the goodwill you built up against UW, kind of goes away after the UNC game. I'm willing to say that it could be a fluke. And when you turn the ball over 5 times in a game, like CSU could fumble the ball 4 times a game, every game the rest of the year. I don't think they're going to lose all 4 or not recover any of them in any game the rest of the year. That's just a weird circumstance. In that UNC game. So I'm willing to agree that it could be a fluke kind of thing, but they've got to prove it once again. Like I think, like I said, all that goodwill that they built up from the impressive week 1 showing is kind of all out the window. And like I said too, like I had them at 1-1, I had them at 2-2. I felt like the UTSA game was more likely that they would lose than Wazoo because, like you said, Wazoo, just even though they have the name recognition, that's not the same Wazoo team that beat the crap out of CSU the last couple of years. And there's no Cam Ward over on that other sideline next week when they come to Kansas. So I always had them at 2-2, and I felt like it would look better maybe. And they still got 2 weeks to show that, going into Mountain West play. But this is a real opportunity here to prove that UNC game really was a fluke. And it was just a weird night at Canvas, which there have been many of those not just during Jay's tenure, but since that stadium has opened. So I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that it was a fluke, but they've got to prove it, like I said, this week. And I think this is just such a huge swing game for them, which is something that you and I talked about before the season, about looking at some of the crucial games on the schedule. This was always going to be one of those.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. I appreciate you hopping on with us this afternoon. I do have to ask you, just because, I'm an alum. I worked for the football team for multiple years, really at the best point of success post Sonny Lubick, at least under Jim McElwain. So there's some emotion involved for me that's not going to be the case for you. How much pressure objectively should be on Jay Norvell right now?
I think there should be a lot of pressure. Like I think like the contract thing is what it is. Like he's got 1 year left after this year, and it seemed like, from what I've been reading and stuff, and there's other people I've been talking about, there's other people that it might be cheaper to get rid of him after this season than pay his salary. I think the buyout after this year, or if you do it before the start of 2026, is something like it's cheaper than what you would have to pay him next year. So there's that goes into it. This is always going to be a prove it year for Jay. And, they are where they're supposed to be right now at 1-1, even though it didn't look pretty in the one game that they did win. These are 2 massive games, and I think he understands that too. In what, listening to what he said today at the press conference, like they want to be a top Group of 5 program. The UTSA is that. Washington State, even though I don't think this team is that good, still is going to be one of the premier programs likely in the new look Pac-12, a team that everybody else is kind of chasing to get. Even if like both them and Oregon State are not off to great starts this year and probably might not have great seasons. That's a team you're going to be playing against a lot over the next, every year going forward, starting next year. So these are 2 measuring stick games. And if they don't win either of them, then I think the pressure is really heated up on Jay, because if you're going into Mountain West play at 1-3, that every game then is like kind of a must win, not must win, but like you're just playing with fire at that point, especially we talked about how important this month of September was going to be after, he's starting the season on the road, in Seattle. You've got these 3 home games, all of which are, if not, the games you need to win, like the UNC game, or these next 2 games that are winnable. It was always going to tell us a lot about the CSU team. So I think we're going to learn a lot about Jay as well as a coach over these next 2 weeks, kind of dealing with some adversity and seeing if he can correct things during an early season bye week after a disappointing performance. Like we're going to learn a lot about what what kind of coach he is. Like I feel like we've learned a lot the last couple of years, and I've been a fan of Jay. I've been a defender of his, as you have been as well. I think the situation that he inherited was a lot worse than people gave it credit for, and I think he's done a good job building up some equity on the roster and things like that, and turning things around with the fan base. But this is always going to be the prove it year for him, heading into a contract year next year, which contract years in college football just don't really exist anymore. Like you either have a multi-year extension every couple of years, or you're getting fired. That's just how it is. And this year was always going to be the one that makes or breaks Jay's CSU tenure.
You're the man, TK. You got anything you want to promote that's coming out?
Not much, just kind of everything over at denvergazette.com that I've been doing. So a lot of college football stuff coming. College basketball is right on the corner too. I'm going to, get my podcast, Basketball in the Mountains, back up and running as we get ready for the hoop season, which is less than 2 months away, which I know you and I are both pumped for. But in the meantime, all that college football coverage, over on my Twitter account, Blue Sky as well. And then obviously denvergazette.com for all of it.
We might just be a basketball state, Tyler. Between the Broncos yesterday and this, we might just be a basketball
Buffs had a rough
state.
one. I was at Houston the other day, which I know a lot of your viewers, I'm sure, were happy about that performance. It was not pretty for the team in Boulder either. And Air Force lost. It was a rough weekend for football in Colorado, like you said.
Good stuff, man. Tyler does great work. Make sure that you guys support him. Subscribe to the Denver Gazette. Follow him on Twitter. Subscribe to his podcast. All that fun stuff. Much love, man. Thanks for coming on with us.
Hey, man, anytime. I'm always here.
Awesome. All right, before we get out of here, take a quick breath real quick so that get an ad in on the production side. If you're looking for a spot to watch Monday Night Football, come to the DNVR bar tonight. Happy hours extended until 7 p.m. Great deals. We're open at 11 a.m. daily. I got lunch specials, really great food. It's an awesome spot. Come check it out. Shout out to our guy Blake for joining the DNVR Supporters Club. Much love. I appreciate you, as well as all of our supporters in Ram Nation, but joining the Supporters Club, a great way to support the work we do here at DNVR. Kind of going back to the Toyota chat, I don't know. I personally just don't really care if the quarterback is out on a Saturday night on a bye week. They're not robots. They're not going to be locked into the facility 365, 24 hours a day. That's just not realistic. I don't know. When you're winning, nobody cares about that kind of stuff. But everything, the pressure just amplifies when the results have not been there. And I understand that. He has certainly got to play better. He would be the first to tell you that. Henry says he would only make fun of him if he was drinking a White Claw. And you want to make fun of the TikToks. That's a different conversation. But I just have no beef with guys spending a Saturday night out on the town on a bye week. That is what every college student in America does, including the student athletes. I promise you, if you get to know them a little bit, they're just people like you or me. Rick says he was looking at the UNC game, and lots of the advanced metrics actually look decent. Advanced run metrics were elite. Yeah, they did a great job of making UNC one-dimensional. It's not to say that you don't put any stock into the results at all. I just think you kind of have to take the early season results with a grain of salt, similarly to Washington, and kind of hope that the real CSU is somewhere in between that team that we saw score on 3 out of 5 possessions in the second half, and kind of the team that got it going there in the second quarter against UW and put a couple of nice scoring drives together. I need to see them find some consistency. That is for certain. I still don't feel like the Mountain West is going to be a juggernaut this season. Still feel like CSU, even if they come out of the non-conference slate at 2-2, should be right there in the top quarter of the conference. I know we dropped them to 7, I think it was, on the power ranking for last weekend. That was more a dramatic, it was hyperbole. It was just to make an example of the bad performance. I don't truly believe that they're in the bottom half of the league. But with that in mind, before we get out of here, I did have kind of just a couple of thoughts on the Mountain West as a whole. We'll be doing the power ranking again on Friday. There's going to be some significant movement, I would say, really for the first time. I think we're starting to get a good idea of who these teams are. I do feel like Utah State is still the biggest wild card to me. I was optimistic that a great coach like Bronco Mendenhall with an athletic quarterback in Bryson Barnes would be able to do some things athletically, or would be able to do some things offensively. We saw him take advantage of an athletic quarterback skill set last year with Devin Dampier. I know he wasn't the OC, but just fundamentally, I felt like he was going to be able to put that offense in a place to succeed. I did have questions defensively, but they were fairly stout against Air Force. Air Force ran the ball with a lot of consistency. That was to be expected. They got torched. The Falcons' defense is not what I anticipated it would be. Their run game, the O-line, all of that is as advertised. Defensively, they were just getting torched for chunk plays in a way that we just have not seen. Really, that's been the underrated element of Calhoun's success, I would say, going back over the last decade, is they've been really stout defensively. They've had under the radar D linemen, especially in the interior. They've had backers that can move, and they've had safeties, I feel like, that have been really solid now, going all the way back to one of the all-time great football names in Weston Steelhammer. I love watching New Mexico. I'm not going to lie. It makes you a little bit nervous in that, 14-game win streak, haven't lost to them since 2009. They play with a real confidence. Now, I will say UCLA sucks. If you watch the show on Friday, I said I felt like New Mexico had a good chance to get that one. It's a dead environment. UCLA looked awful in the couple of weeks before, including in their loss to UNLV. But I'm not trying to poo-poo or diminish anything that the Lobos have done to this point. To go into the Big House and to compete, and then to go into the Rose Bowl and punk UCLA the way that they did, it's good for the league. It's good for Lobos fans who have been through a lot. I mean, as tough as it's been for CSU at times, you lose guys like Tanjay and Kershke and Boomjock and Chase Wilson, some of these guys to the portal. Like, you look at New Mexico, man, they have an awesome basketball season. Donovan Dent gets poached by UCLA. They lose Patino to Xavier. On the football side, they have their first relevant season in almost a decade and lose every piece of it. Both starting receivers, multiple running backs. Your quarterback goes to Utah along with the OC. I mean, it's been tough for Lobos fans, so I'm happy for them. Eck was a phenomenal hire. He's got WWE-like charisma. I think New Mexico is a frisky team that could make some noise, and given the fact that they're 2-1, they've got a good chance to make a bowl this year. They're going to be interesting. I'm curious to see how that team looks come November. If this is going to be sustainable in year one. I do have some questions about their depth. Are they going to be able to maintain this if a guy or two get dinged up? We've seen that sometimes with new hires, like the juice is there. He's got them playing with confidence, but they just don't quite have the depth to survive a 12-game season. That could still be in play. But that's a hell of a job that Eck is doing down there in Albuquerque, and I'm really excited to see how it plays out. Wyoming played Utah tough defensively. They took a big step forward this year, which was something I talked about quite a bit throughout the summer. Offensively, they have speed out wide more so than they have in a long time, but Gillenborg got hurt in that game, and the O-line's a mess. Caden Anderson's kind of taken a beating this season, so I do have some questions about their ability to put points on the board, but I mean, they played hard. It's 3-0 game going into halftime. Utah moved the ball a ton, and some weird stuff happened, but do have to commend Utah for being willing to go to Laramie in the first place. All of this is just to say that I feel like the league is pretty much what we thought it would be in the preseason. I think Utah State is maybe a little bit better than I thought. Air Force maybe not quite as solid as I thought, although I still feel like they're a very formidable team. I'm not completely bought into Fresno quite yet. I know they kicked the shit out of Oregon State, but Oregon State sucks, a lot like what I would say about UCLA. This point, I don't know if you could say UCLA, Oregon State, or Washington State's really a great win. You get the brand recognition of it all, but the Mountain West is still there for the taking for CSU, and that's why getting some momentum and getting some confidence these next couple of weeks is huge. I like that you're picking your quarterback now, and you can spend the rest of the week, focusing on the game plan and not having the distraction of multiple quarterbacks going back and forth. I don't think it allows you to be quite as sharp with your scheme, with your game plan, all of that in the matchup. Shout out to Nick joining the DNVR supporters club as well. Really appreciate everybody in Ram Nation for the love and support that they give, and especially for OGs like Nick who have been around. since the very beginning. It's been pretty cool to see the growth of the show these last couple of years, but I'm never going to forget those that were rocking with us, in the dog days of Adazio, when we're talking about some of the worst football I've ever covered. It was horrendous, but hopefully this week and kind of moving forward, we'll have some fun stuff to talk about over the course of the rest of the season. Let's throw it to overtime real quick. We've got a couple of thoughts, then we'll call it a day. All right. If you missed it, Tory Horton had his first NFL touchdown over the weekend, had 2 catches on 4 targets against Pittsburgh and a win for the Seahawks. I was kind of mad at myself. I was high on Seattle coming into this year. I feel like they're going to win that division. And they lost week 1. I picked them to win. Then I got gun shy, and I picked them to lose on the road this past weekend. Of course, they come out and pull it. You got to stick to your gut. That's what I try and do with some of this power ranking stuff. You can't go too far from what your eyes and what months of information have led you to believe. Weird stuff happens in small sample sizes, but it was just really cool to see. Really, really cool to see Tory catch his first NFL touchdown. Funny enough, his first collegiate catch was also a touchdown back when he was a freshman at Nevada in 2021. Scored against Wyoming, which, hey, little extra bonus points for doing it against the Pokes as well. But it really feels like there's an opportunity for Tory to make some noise in that offense this year. I think JSN commands a lot of attention on the other side of the field, and Tory's a guy with 4.3 speed who can run a full route tree. I had a buddy send to me in the DMs the other day, he's like 7'11", he's always open. And I just think so long as he can stay healthy, there's going to be a good opportunity for him to really be a playmaker in that offense. And it's been clear, if you'd been paying attention going back to the preseason, that they're really high on him, and they're trying to get the ball in his hands. He's returning punts, 4 targets this past week. I mean, that's encouraging at this stage of his career, that he's already on the field, that he's already part of the game plan, that they want to prioritize him, that they want to get the football in his hands. Obviously rooting for him. He's a really great dude off the field, deserves all the success that will come his way. One of the most genuine, down-to-earth individuals that I have been fortunate to cover. Also just so happens that he is an incredible talent. And I will forever argue that had he not gotten injured, if he played a full 12-game season last year and had the season that he could and should have had in a fair and perfect world, not only would I confidently bet he'd be a top 50 pick, I think he had a fringe opportunity to even maybe, be early second round, late first round, even if a team fell in love with him, because there just aren't a lot of guys that can run like him, but are complete route runners and legitimate 3-down threats. You can line up inside or outside. You can go over the top, across the middle, whatever. You get the ball in his hands, he's going to make plays. And it's just cool to see a guy like him, much like what you could say with Trey McBride in Arizona, making the most of their opportunity and making all of us proud. The NFC West has got just a ton of CSU ties now, with the Kubiak brothers both being OCs, Trey in Arizona, Tory in Seattle. As a Broncos guy, I love it. If they're not going to be in Denver, I don't want to see them in Kansas City or with the Raiders or something like that, where I've got to root for them but also root against them, with my allegiances. If you missed it, got swept in the whiteout. CSU volleyball did, I should say. It's kind of turning into another disappointing non-conference slate. CSU football, the soccer program, also lost a tough one, 2-1 to DU in Denver on Sunday. Just cracked the top 25. Don't imagine they'll stay in the top 25, unfortunately, but still a great season coming together under Keely Hagan. And if you have an opportunity to go check them out, I recommend that you do so. That's all I've got for you guys today. Again, we'll be going live Friday. I'll be at practice tomorrow and Wednesday providing updates. We'll have written content coming out over the course of the week. Shout out to all of you for supporting the content. It means the world to me. Shout out to our incredible producer, Dion, behind the scenes, making all of this move so smoothly. Could not do it without him. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the man.